EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. J-Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday, brother? We got the Tush pusher in front of us. We had some Eagles players speak down at the NovaCare Complex yesterday, including the big stars, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Jordan Mailata. How you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
Glad it's finally going to be over, at least for the short term. If they vote it down, it'll be back again, but be nice to stop talking about it for a little bit. And this will be it. If they don't ban it today, it'll be here for the 2025 season. But I don't even like the phrasing, the terminology about it, because you see, they read the headlines, and I believe fans have been gaslighted on this issue. I've been very honest and upfront about that. You see it with the headlines. It's you'll see it all over. NFL votes to ban the Tush push. No, they didn't. It's a completely different resolution. It's not. They changed it. The original stupid Packers rule, the resolution, yeah, that was obviously trying to get one play out of the game. They removed that, replaced it with get pushing out of the game, which is what they should have done in the first place. And you still see the same wording, the same phrasing, the same philosophy. Now you can make the argument that, behind it, what spawned it is the tush push. That's legitimate. But when people even frame it the wrong way, it's bothersome. So I'm glad it's going to go away, up or down. I'm glad it's going to go away for the short term.
Any idea when the time might come down today, John? Probably somewhat later on today, maybe noon.
Sometime this morning, I would say. Hopefully before we get off the air.
Got a feeling it's going to be gone, right?
I believe so, because the competition committee's behind it now. The safety commission they have is behind it now. So I believe they will push it across the finish line. And the guys who did talk yesterday did not seem all that concerned about it, especially Jordan Mailata, who was basically like, we don't talk about it. If there's no pushing, we won't push. That's that dominant mindset they have with the offensive line. Now, Jalen Hurts was more, he basically declined comments on it. And A.J. Brown was like, it's 1 yard, and laughed about it. It's like, I don't care. So, I think there's a big disconnect of what the players believe and what the fans and media believe.
Yeah, we'll see when that comes down later on today. We'll get the update on Tush Push. I think it's going to be gone for those who are following along with it. And if you're watching Birds 365, I would imagine you're following along with it. John, the other thing that happened yesterday was just the players spoke. You just mentioned, you heard from Mailata, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, head coach Nick Sirianni. I'll say this, John, and maybe this is just the selfish nature of me, but boy, it felt good to see him at least up there. Felt good to get a notification on my phone. The Philadelphia Eagles are live and players are speaking. I was pumped up to see that. What'd you make of the players that spoke yesterday?
Yeah, it's good to get the quarterback. Obviously, we haven't talked to Jalen Hurts since cleanout day after the Super Bowl, so it's been a while. And there's more significant change. I'll tell you what I took most from Jalen. He seems a lot calmer about this transition. That's been a big story about the constant transition, really, with him dating back to college at Alabama. Different play color every year, yada yada. And that's the case this year. But Kevin Patullo's been here the whole time. Kevin Patullo's, worked with Jalen Hurts for a long time now. And he seemed much less, he seemed much more confident in the transition this time. Even though if you peel back the onion, there's different pieces with new position coach with Scott Loeffler and new passing game coordinator with Parks Frazier. But I think that foundation with Kevin Patullo makes him a little bit more comfortable with what's going to happen. So that's what I took from a football perspective away from it. I think that's a positive. But they won the Super Bowl last year with a guy coming from outside the building,
Right.
and all the talk about 95% different terminology. They won the Super Bowl. So you can do it in a bunch of different ways, but I do think he's more comfortable with this change than some of the other changes, certainly this change last year. So that was the most notable part to me. And AJ got to explain his philosophy after the Super Bowl. You know, thought he'd be fulfilled, wasn't fulfilled, which I think is a good thing for Eagles fans. You're taught in pro football and really coming up, if you play the game, that the entire goal is to win the Lombardi Trophy, and that is, obviously, but the fact that driven people they don't stop, and they're not satiated by that. That's a good thing. Think about Tom Brady. You don't stop. Tom Brady's out there breaking laws during COVID when he's already got a bunch of trophies. Driven people are driven, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, AJ Brown was excellent yesterday. I thought Jordan Mailata was excellent as well. QB1 Jalen Hurts spoke. John, I'll ask you this, maybe a little bit of unconventional question for Jalen, for me to you on Jalen Hurts, but he has a very specific style up at the podium. Now, some people love it, some people don't like it. I'm not here to opine on that, but how does that change how you approach him as a beat reporter? He's kind of very guarded, uses a little bit of the same slogans over and over again. I thought you had a great question about all the different things that come when you're a Super Bowl MVP winner, between the Met Gala and Men's Health and all these different things, and kind of just gave you the same cliche as a response. How does that change how you approach talking to a guy like Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I try to get him talking. Sometimes he's very guarded. Sometimes he'll completely shut down a question like the tush push. He's like, yeah, something else he said that's not pertinent.
Yeah, about the White House, right?
Yeah, the White House. Yeah, thank you. So I try to get him talking, and once he starts talking, sometimes he gives you a little bit of a nugget. But the guy's tremendously guarded. It's not changing. Perfect example. AJ got engaged. We congratulated him. We're joking about John Legend, and he's having a good time and a laugh about it. And I congratulated Jalen on getting married. Didn't even register.
Right.
Didn't want to talk about it. Didn't even want to say. He's just extremely, extremely guarded. He's got a higher profile position. He's been through a lot of criticism, despite the fact that, guys like him and Nick Sirianni, same way, will say they don't hear it. They hear it. They hear it. And it changes you a little bit. So from his perspective, he's very guarded, and that's not going to change. So you basically, I try to get him talking.
Yeah. You're right. Once he gets going a little bit, he starts talking, you can get a little bit more out of him. If he doesn't like your question, you're toast.
Yeah. And that's fine. He can, we're all big boys. I've been shut down before.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he knows me at this point. He knows I'm not trying to gotcha. So that's part of it is too. He knows certain people, and it doesn't matter who they are. If he doesn't want to answer a question, he's not going to answer. But if he trusts you a little bit, and he wants to talk about something, he'll go off. There's times where I've asked him questions, and he'll take it to where he wants to talk about something, and you get something that way. So my goal is to get him talking, basically.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, I get it. He is closed off though, man. Sometimes it's hard to listen to. Not in a way that I'm judging him or anything, but just like, sometimes would want a little bit more as a fan, but it doesn't really matter what I want at the end of the day. But I do find it interesting the way he answers questions. Definitely an unconventional dude. Some would call it prima donna like John. You know, I've heard that before, and it's hard to brush it off completely. But listen, he keeps winning, so he can basically do what he wants up there. All good on that front. I thought Mailata was great yesterday, John. You guys always have great conversations with Jordan Mailata. He seems like, I said this yesterday, he seems like just a regular dude who's really good at football. You know, like I could go and hang out with Jordan Mailata anytime.
Yeah, Jordan Mailata is great. You know, behind the scenes, in front of the camera. He's just very open. He understands the relationship that you need to have, especially in this town. You know, he's one of the guys who fought to keep us in the locker room, believe it or not, because you know, Oren Burks was here, and you know, Oren's a big part of the NFLPA, and they were trying to push the idea of sort of mixed zones and taking reporters out of the locker room. And you know, Jordan basically was the one who said, "Yeah, you know, that's not going to work here, or it's going to be detrimental to the team." You know, because there is such passion and there is such a demand for information about this football team and having relationships. And again, the core group of people that cover this team, yeah, they very rarely are even fans going to criticize them because they do a professional job. You might not like what they report, but they do a professional job. So, um, Jordan realizes we're fair, and you know, so that has developed this relationship to where you can see those kind of conversations and that kind of back and forth. Like I was talking to him about the tush push, we were just going back and forth about it. You know, that's over years. You know, I've been here since day one when he was here. I was talking to him when nobody was talking to him, and he was the last guy on the roster, just because he's funny dude. You know, talented, extremely talented. You've seen the singing, you saw the Chris Stapleton stuff. We're talking about that. Um, yeah, he's a great story. Like there's going to be books written about Jordan Mailata and his, because it's crazy where he started. He didn't know how to put on his helmet when he first got here.
It's crazy, is right. Now he's a leader. Now he's a leader of a Super Bowl winning football team. Pretty amazing his journey. There's no doubt about it, John. Good. I would imagine there'll be a 30 for 30 or NFL films or something on that story too. Right when he hangs him up. I'm looking.
There should be.
Yeah,
there should be.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. We'll get the update, John, today in the tush push. I know we're done talking about it here, but we're going to have to cover it until they at least wrap it up. Any idea on the time for the tush push? Will come out probably noon today or maybe this morning, maybe even when we're on here on Birds 365. What do you think?
I'm hoping as early as possible, but it's definitely coming today. They'll know. They'll know whether they have the votes, and it'll come quickly if they have the votes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Let's see if it ends up happening. We got Mike Gill and BLG today. So we got two great guests for everybody to break down the recent events for the Philadelphia Eagles, the recent changes, the tush push conversation, which we'll have with Mike Gill and Brandon Lee Gowan. So we'll cover it all for everybody. John, anything else stick out in the press conferences yesterday to you? Like I said, it was good to just get the notification that the Eagles were back up on the podium.
Yeah, well, Nick obviously got his extension, didn't want to talk about the length. You know, it's much more difficult to, I assume it's 4 years, but that's just an assumption. But he's going to be here for a while if everything goes to plan. I was hoping he'd spike the football, but I gave him an opportunity. He didn't want to, which is understandable. But if anybody deserves to spike the football, it's Nick Sirianni. And he didn't. Which you know, he's an interesting guy because he does have this personality that will rub people the wrong way on television when he's spiking the football that way, but he won't do it off. He won't do it off the field. Just tremendous success. But you know, there's this whole cadre of people that won't accept CEO coaches, even though the best coaches in the history of football are CEO coaches, a lot of them. And for whatever reason, they value play callers more than, the definition of the job. The head coach of the football team is supposed to be involved with the whole team, not the head coach of the offense, not the head coach of the defense. But in many cities, you have a head coach of the offense and the head coach of the defense. My best example of that was Sean McVay when he first got the job and with the Rams. Wade Phillips was hired to be his defensive coordinator, legendary defensive coordinator. He wouldn't even watch the game when the defense was on the field. He had nothing to do with it. He would just sit around, talk to the quarterback, and I don't know. People like that. I think if you look at, and Tom Coughlin was the first one I talked about it with him when he became a CEO coach, because I had been advocating for CEO coach for a long time. Mike Gill's going to come on. He can probably talk about that. Tom Coughlin told me, because I said, why? It doesn't make sense to me, because Tom Coughlin started out as a defensive guy. So I asked him once, I said, why aren't there more CEO coaches? Like, I go in and say, I'm in charge of I want to be in charge of the whole. Why would you want just what I said? Why would you want somebody that's just paying attention to one side of the football? And he did explain to me that, well, you have to get in the building and establish yourself and make sure everybody's on your page and do that. And then you can elevate to being a CEO coach, which is kind of what happened very quickly with Nick Sirianni. But so he's the one who explained that to me. So I understand more why they hire play callers more often than not to start. But the guys who elevate to the CEO level, so to speak, that's who I want as a coach. And I think more owners.
Nick Sirianni, and he gets the big extension. Congrats to Nick. I'm sure the number will come out eventually. Maybe it won't. I'm not sure, John. I'm not sure if anybody will.
Yeah, it'll come out eventually, but it'll be a while.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. We got Mike Gill in the green room coming up here. We'll have Brandon Lee Goutwin later on in hour number 2. So 2 great guests, our usual Wednesday guest here on Birds 365. Let's go to Mike Gill now here on Birds 365. You can follow him at Mike Gill Show. Listen to his show on 97.3 ESPN down the shore and subscribe to his YouTube channel at Mike Gill Show. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?